You can't experience the world through a book. I was born in San Diego, California. Moved to the East Coast in the mid-80s when I was 6. Was tossed back and forth between parents from the East Coast to the West Coast through my early childhood. Having parents live on either side of the U.S. helped me travel quite a bit. My father was a coin and precious gems broker, which allowed him to travel around the world. And on some of our adventures, one of the places was living 6 months in the Cayman Islands. As a 12-year-old, that was quite a fun place. My mother was a missionary in the early 90s. In 93, took us to Belize, and we lived there for over a year. As I got older, it was obviously harder to travel when you have to pay for the tickets yourself. But I was still destined to see the rest of the world, and I'm still trying. I've been to Central America, been to many of the islands in the Caribbean, Canada, and 49 of the 50 states. Hawaii will definitely close that gap someday. My favorite experiences have probably been in Puerto Rico, Belize, of course. Good old-fashioned road trips are always nice, and they've probably shaped me for the person I am today. As I grew older, the thing that made sense to me were movies. Not just watching them, but understanding how they worked. Who made them? Why they made them? I was interested in the person behind the camera. I was interested in the props, from the actors to the crew. What was it all about? Why did somebody want to write something down and create it and put it on film for the rest of the world to see? I wanted to know this. Writing all kinds of stories and screenplays, depending on my mood, of course. I sat around in what I would call movie mode, and this is where my mind would drift off. And I would find myself engaged in some sort of scene that I would just make up from some movie I just made up. I could even smell the morning dew on the moss that covered the trees in the rainforest next to the river. I mean, I engaged myself in these things. I know some people might think that's a little bit crazy, but let's just say I was never bored. After leaving Florida and venturing into my life in my early 20s, I moved back to California. And I made lots of good friends, and eventually loosened up on drinking whiskey like an Irish fool. I worked at an Irish bar for about 8 years, most of my 20s, and I bounced and managed that. I had friends that wanted to make movies around that time, and that's what I wanted to do. Sometime after about the fifth short film, I finally realized we need to create a full-length film. So we put everything we had into it, from the auditions to asking for favors, finding out what kind of camera we could use, calling upon schools that allowed us to use these cameras, and it felt like the real thing. However, being that we did finish them from beginning to end, it was horrible. I look back on it now, and it was horrible. But it was a great learning experience, and all of us learned quite a bit. Now continuing to write and do other things like special effects makeup and working at whatever haunted houses that I could to get more experience in just that on the off seasons. I never gave up trying to be a part of the movies in some way, whether it was to be an extra, an actor, a writer, anything. I don't care if you wanted me to get you coffee for some kind of actor. I would have done it. So in 2015, I was asked to be a producer of an independent film called Prepper. Shot it in and around the Dallas area, and this was one of the most incredible experiences I have had to date. The things I learned, the things I realized I was doing at the end of every day, sitting back and realizing I was on a real film set. I felt like I had reached my goal. I look back on the only thing that reminds me that it was not a dream is by seeing that it is still on Amazon and Hulu, and of course having a signed movie poster does kind of help. Having completed an awesome accomplishment supported by my family, I looked around at not only my professional goals, but my personal goals at this point. And that was my family. We moved back to West Virginia, where my family, or my wife's family, sorry, where my wife's family is from, and we began to settle down away from all the city life. Now I'll admit, this place is a little slow for me, and most of the time I do keep myself busy with woodworking, expressing my art in many different mediums, anything that keeps my mind busy. But what keeps me most busy are definitely my children. My daughter is 7, going on 13, and my son is 3 and won't stay on the ground. I also work as a tour guide, part-time in a historical Civil War cave. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm doing this, and I love doing school. So, from traveling most of my life and creating film and keeping the dreams alive every day, I'll close with this. Live life knowing it might be your last. Say yes to everything. Use love whenever it's possible. And get out there and see the world because you can't experience it through a book.